Hi everyone, I want to continue talking about this Google Doodle from March 17th because there's a lot of things being depicted in this imagery that are very important that I still haven't had a chance to go over yet. In my last video I talked about how I believe this represents the consummation of the covenant, and I may talk about that a little bit more. But in this video I want to talk a little bit more about how I believe this imagery also represents the Antichrist covenant. Okay, what I did is I explained in my last video is I put two words that describe this imagery over here, and I talked about how in the first table I also put in the words tree of life and Jesus, and I talked about how I believe this represents the consummation of the true covenant, and again I want to talk a little bit more about that. But I also tried putting these two words, and then I just put in the word Obama. And I'm going to go ahead and show you the table because it's really important where the words come up, but I'm not going to say the words, I'm just going to spell them. But as you can see, there's just one match, and this is coming up in Ezekiel 16:63 through 17:7. I believe this is an important number right here because it's Hebrew year 5777. I believe it's still technically within the Hebrew year 77, but I believe it's gonna change probably very soon into 778. And when you go further down into the text in Ezekiel 17, I think you'll see that these numbers 17 and 18 are very important as well. But I'm going to read the matrix from the table starting with Ezekiel 16:63 because that's where the matrix begins. And then I'm going to continue reading the rest of Ezekiel 17 from the Blue Letter Bible. But starting from Ezekiel 16:63, it says, that thou mayest remember and be confounded, and never open thy mouth any more because of thy shame, when I have forgiven thee all that thou hast done, saith the Lord Jehovah. And the word of Jehovah came unto me, saying, Son of man, put forth a riddle, and speak a parable unto the house of Israel, and say, Thus saith the Lord Jehovah, a great eagle with great wings and long pinions, full of feathers, which had diverse colors, came into Lebanon and took the top of the cedar. And I just want to show you that this is where Obama's name comes up in the table. Okay, so you can see his name right here in the lavender with the letters O, B, A, M, A, and you can see that it says over here, the Lord Jehovah, and the word of Jehovah came unto me, saying, Son of man, put forth a riddle and speak a parable unto the house of Israel, and say, Thus saith the Lord Jehovah, a great eagle with great wings and long pinions, full of feathers, which had diverse colors, came unto Lebanon and took off the top cedar. He cropped off the topmost of the young twigs and carried it to a land of traffic. He set it in a city of merchants. He took also of the seed of the land and planted it in a fruitful soil. He placed it beside many waters, and he set it as a willow tree, and it grew and became as a spreading vine of low stature, whose branches turned toward him, and the roots thereof were under him. So it became a vine, and brought forth branches, and shot forth sprigs. There was also another great eagle with great wings and many feathers, and behold, this vine did bend its roots toward him, and shot forth its branches toward him, from the beds of its plantation, that he might water it. It was planted in, and it goes on to say, a goodly soil, and I'll read that from the Blue Letter Bible. But as you can see, this is in verse 77, where it's talking about another great eagle, and I think this great eagle is the true eagle. I think this one is most likely referring to Jesus. It's a little confusing, but the top one is definitely referring to Obama, and it's hard to go through this table without showing these words, but I'm going to go ahead and spell out these two words right here, because they're coming up right where you have the word seed. And so the first word is this word with the letters P-E-N-I-S, and then I want to show you the meaning of this term right here, the fruitful soil that this seed is planted in. And then the other word is this word right here next to the word seed, and going through this other word, the letters E-R-E-C-T. It's another word for stand. And I've talked about how both the Antichrist and the true Christ, of course, stand at the same time. Jesus is standing on Mount Zion with the 144,000, as you can see in Revelation 14:1, where it says, "And I looked, and there before me was the Lamb standing on Mount Zion, and with him 144,000 who had his name and his Father's name written on their foreheads." And then the Antichrist will also be standing in the holy place. And I've talked about how a long time ago, when I was trying to understand Matthew 24, where it says, "When therefore ye see the abomination of desolation, which was spoken of through Daniel the prophet, standing in the holy place, let the reader understand." And I was trying to understand the meaning of the word stand, because it can also mean set up. It actually, in this form, means having standed. And so I tried to look up the exact form of the word, and then that's when I noticed that this exact form is also used in Revelation 14:1, where it talks about Jesus standing on Mount Zion with the 144,000. And so when you look at the word stand in the Greek, it's this word right here. The basic form is estimi, means to cause to stand, but as you can see, it has this many different inflections for that one word, which means to stand. And so I'll just go through all of them so you can see how many there are. And this is just the New Testament. Okay, so out of all those different inflections, these two use this exact same inflection right here, which is the word estos, the form of the word estimi, and it means having standed. And when I saw that, that's when I realized that these two events take place at the same time. And this was several years ago when I realized that, and that's when I realized that Mount Zion is the spiritual holy place, and that the abomination of desolation is going to take place in the holy place in Jerusalem, but this will be taking place in New Jerusalem, which is spiritual Jerusalem. And this was also confirmed by Natan's testimony. He had said that the redemption was going to take place in Israel, but that the war was going to take place there as well. And this is the extended version, so I can put the link in the description box if you haven't seen that testimony. But I had understood that years ago, like I said earlier, once I saw that these two verses used the exact form of the word stand, I realized that they were both taking place at the same time, and that there was a spiritual holy place as well as the physical holy place, which is the Temple Mount, which is Jerusalem, and then the spiritual would be New Jerusalem, would be Mount Zion. I had also understood that the abomination of desolation takes place at the same time that the war takes place, and this would be the War of Armageddon. This would be the final battle, Gog-Magog war. They both happen at the same time. They're actually the same event, and this is also the same time that the Mount of Olives will split and Jerusalem is surrounded. And so if you look at Luke 21, you see that that's when Jerusalem is compassed with armies. And then it says those who are in Judea to flee to the mountains. And so that's when I realized that the abomination of desolation is going to take place at the same time as the Battle of Armageddon. And then of course this is also the same event as what's going to take place in Zechariah 14 when the Mount of Olives splits and Israel is a cup of trembling and is surrounded. So these are all describing the same moment in time. And what I've come to realize is that this is also confirmed in Ezekiel 17. And it's interesting that once again, this is in chapter 17. I believe it's indicating the year. And like I said earlier, I believe this is referring to the true eagle, which would be Jesus. And then I'm going to continue reading from over here. It says, there was also another great eagle with great wings and many feathers, and behold, this vine did bend her roots toward him and shot forth her branches toward him, that he might water it by the furrows of her plantation. It was planted in a good soil by great waters, that it might bring forth branches, and that it might bear fruit, that it might be a goodly vine. Okay, I'm just going to skip down to verse 13, because I believe this is where it begins to describe the mark of the beast. And it's interesting that it would be starting with verse 13, and it's in Revelation 13 where it talks about the mark of the beast. But I have to get into the words and the meanings of some of the words so that you can see why this appears to be describing the mark of the beast, which might take some time. So I'll have to do that in the next video in part 2. But I just want to back up to show you something really interesting over here. When you go back to where it's talking about the seed, and I'll just show you the table once again. It says, he took also of the seed of the land and planted it in a fruitful soil. Okay, in the King James it says a fruitful field. And so if you look at this word, first of all, if you look at it in the Hebrew, we'll check that first. I haven't even checked to see what it is in the Hebrew yet, but it says field, land. Okay, so he planted it in the land or the soil or plain. But if you look at this word in the Greek, it also means that, but it has another meaning which I thought was interesting. In the Greek, it uses this word over here. Okay, it's the word pedion, and as you can see, it shows this open field in these images, so it means that as well. But if you look at the definition, it says open country, field, plain, flat. But this third meaning over here says female genitals. Over here it says the line in the Lysistrata uses this term as an innuendo wordplay on its usual meaning of plain to refer to a female's genitals. Okay, and so this is where you have the word that's highlighted in the pink, where it talks about the seed being planted in a fruitful soil. But I'm about out of time, so I'll have to continue in the next video. Thank you.